important piece then is, how am I going to interact with you all during the course of the investigation? We know because of public meeting rules, you all cannot meet in groups of 2 unless it's a formal meeting that you all are having, in groups larger than 2 rather, unless it's a formal meeting. So of course, it's going to be necessary for me to be able to have some point of contact to keep you all apprised of the investigation as it's going on, and keep that flow of information going. So what I have recommended and discussed with Julie and Gary is creating a 2x2 kind of system of briefing you all. We would have 2 members of the COB assigned to each investigation. One of those members is going to always be the chair, just to maintain like consistency with writing the reports, and just like you have like one person who's just like always responsible for making sure that those reports are completed and in a particular template or anything of that nature. Additionally, Julie as the current chair, or any future chair as well, would receive specific training on how to access civil and that's our intake system and that sort of thing, if any sort of additional information is needed from that system. So the other person would be on a rotating basis, and we thought that it might make sense to do it alphabetically. So for one investigation, for example, it would be Julie and Gary, and then the next one would be Julie and the other person who falls alphabetically under him. The reason why I thought that was important was because we didn't want to assign just 2 people that are going to do all the reports and all of the investigations. I want to make sure that we promote diversity and perspective and input. Of course, you will all have an opportunity to weigh in on all of the investigations, and you'll, have some type of discourse during your meetings. But there will ultimately need to be a report produced, and so there'll need to be someone responsible for, or a group of 2 that are responsible for producing that report. Certain aspects of that report you all will probably need to vote on as a group, and then other aspects of it in terms of like capturing the narrative, those 2 people who are responsible for the report are essentially going to be responsible for capturing the collective sentiment of the group, highlighting issues that came out during the discussion, where you all landed on that, those sort of things. But in terms of like, for example, the findings or disciplinary recommendations or things like that, then that might be something that you all may want to vote on as a group. And why I say may is because these are recommendations that I'm, just making in terms of what I think might be an efficient and effective way to go about doing these. But after I kind of give this rundown, I definitely want to open the floor for any sort of like questions or discussions around it. If you think that there's some tweaks that need to be made that's going to suit your needs better. But I just kind of wanted to develop out what we were thinking it would look like from start to finish. So again, the 2 people assigned to an investigation would be receiving briefings along the way. And then once the information is released to all of you, you would have an opportunity to discuss that. Julie's going to cover the discussion piece of it, so I won't get too much into that. Other than to just say, of course, even if I have that specific line of communication open with the 2 members assigned to an investigation, that is not to say that if any of you have any sort of questions or concerns about an investigation, that you can't reach out to me for a one-on-one discussion. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. It's not like, only those 2 people can ask questions or talk to me about that investigation, but just to make sure that there's consistent communication, and that communication is, or that knowledge base is transferred from start to finish, from complaint to completion. So then, as far as discussions goes, before I kick it over to Julie, of course, you guys are going to need some opportunity during your meeting to talk about it as a group. And Julie's going to kind of talk about what we were thinking and for parameters around that. The last thing I'll say about the discussion piece is regarding closed sessions. I know this was a topic that we have kind of talked about in some of our previous meetings. We did have a meeting, me and Julie and Ian, with outside counsel to kind of discuss what the parameters are for going into closed session. Then our outside counsel, Cynthia, also consulted with Min Chow, the county attorney, to make sure that we have clarity in any issues where there is any sort of further discussion needed. What I was thinking, though, in terms of making sure that everyone has an opportunity to hear what Cynthia has to say in terms of advising you on their parameters to go in closed session and where you don't have ability to go into closed session, that at your next meeting, your next COB meeting in June, that we would invite Cynthia to come and speak to you all, so that she can essentially advise you on what she thinks are the parameters that you might want to abide by, but also to give you guys an opportunity to ask those questions directly, so that neither Julie or I are like, playing messenger and relaying the legal advice over, and you guys can hear it directly, ask questions, and then as a result of that discussion, my recommendation would be that you maybe create some sort of protocol or procedure around closed policy or closed sessions and how you want to deal with those. So any questions about anything that I said before I kick it over to Julie on the discussion piece?
Before you go to questions, I'm just going to recap at a high level because we've talked about this so much and Mummy really crafted a sound and solid approach as an initialization. We know that investigations will be very new to this group and we will likely have protocol aspects that we'd like to update and change as we go through. Like, we've been in training mode, we've been in initialization mode, we're all still learning, but once we get into the work, the iteration of this process will go faster. So what Mummy's describing in terms of everyone will have access to the same raw data and information about the investigation and the complaint, but two people will be briefed so that we can help organize the group conversation ahead of time. That will be rotating. To start, I will be in all of those conversations for continuity. Ultimately, it would be great if we want to have an investigations lead who is maybe that core person, or if we all start to feel more competent and we can rotate that differently. We also talked about sort of daisy chaining a phone tree where the people who are briefed can also give a primary overview. At this point, we're really trying to initialize a minimum viable product, not because we want to do the bare minimum, but because we want to get started and have a reliable process. And as we iterate, we'll welcome input, feedback, suggestions, criticism. So all of that is welcome now, but this is just to say we did consider a lot of different process and format in how we will do this. All of it is subject to discussion. I think it will be easier to discuss once we get through an investigation. So, Mummy, I just wanted to highlight those sort of key points that everyone will have access to the information directly. It's not just that the people who will be briefed have access, they'll just be briefed directly. They'll sort of craft a discussion plan for what do we need to vote on, what points of discussion probably need the most deliberation, and dealing with closed session. If we can't go into closed session for personnel specific deliberation, which we'll talk about at our next meeting more.
I'll be back.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Anika does double duty on multiple commissions, so we're very grateful for her time tonight. She's gonna come back. Anyways, on those couple of notes, that's sort of what Mummy's framing out here in terms of the initial process. So questions, input, and feedback are welcome, but just to reiterate, this is not like a final formal protocol that we'll never be able to update. This is just how can we get started and be moving now that we have readiness resolution.
Yeah.
I have a question. Are we, at this point, I assume we're going to take all the complaints that come in, right? Because it doesn't look like they're going to be, well, we don't know how many there are, but at this point, we're going to take them all, I assume, right? Yeah. Okay. And so when the investigation is ongoing, Mummy, that's what you're going to be briefing the two people on, sort of the updates of what's happening? Okay.
That's right.
And
those two people won't have access to any of the digital information before the other COB members. It'll be released to all of you at the exact same time when the investigation is complete. So when I'm talking about these two assigned people, it's just like, as Julie said, a briefing to let you all know, hey, this, investigation is going on. This is what it's about. This is how we're thinking about handling it. any input. You know, it's just a conversation essentially.
Okay, and then once the investigation is complete and you write a report, we get that, and then we have 60 days from that point to
Yes.
review it within the group.
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct. You'll get my report as well as ACPD's report.
Okay.
And 60 days.
Of course, you know, I think it's also understandable that while you may be assigned to a particular investigation, you know, you may be curious to know what other investigations are underway and, you know, what the status of those investigations are. So Ian and I are trying to develop kind of like an internal complaint tracker type of thing that'll just be like a very simple spreadsheet to say, you know, you'll be able to at any time see how many investigations we're working on, and what two COB members are assigned to it and the status of that investigation, as well as what documents you can expect to find on evidence.com related to those, so that you'll know what to look for when you go to evidence.com. You'll know there's 3 body-worn camera footage, there's a police report, there's this, there's that, and you'll know that it's associated with this particular investigation. I'm definitely open to any thoughts about how we can make that as effective and user-friendly as possible for you all. We're just thinking, we're working through just like an Excel spreadsheet to make it as easy as possible to use, but just a way for us to like, a place for you to go to just very quickly be able to kind of assess, you know, what the overall picture is that we're looking at on, let's say you want to look at it on a monthly basis or a weekly basis or what have you. And that'll give you a little bit more information than what you would see on the public-facing platform on Civil.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Does that sound good? Yeah.
Everyone gets access to all the information at the same time. 2 people are briefed just for the, you know, we can't all read files and folders and everything exactly the same way to the same depth. We will come together to deliberate before any decisions are made. And we have the opportunity to keep updating this process if any form of like daisy chaining, a phone tree, or other sort of extended briefings make sense. I think in the long term, because we have talked about creating sort of a data committee for assessing what data ACPD already organizes and puts out as part of their briefing, we probably want to be cognizant as we start doing this that, you know, the first time we do everything isn't going to be representative of what we're capable of, but creating some of that for ourselves will be useful, and holding ourselves accountable in that way, that like we have 60 days, we may not want to take 60 days to get things out, but we won't really know what's realistic and practicable until we get through these. So as a starting point, I feel really good about that protocol, and I think we will likely, after we get through the first investigation, convene a specific agenda to review a little, what do they call it, Monday quarterbacking? I just learned this term. Monday quarterbacking. Monday morning quarterbacking of the game and how it went. Sports. I love sports. I just don't know all the strategy and the metrics. So.
And how long does, Mommy, how long do you have to do your report?
Up to 30 days.
And that's the same as OPR?
I don't know that we specified a specific time period. Tosh, please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think we specified a particular time period.
So our investigations, depending on what type it is usually 30 to 45 days. But that time frame starts at the point of when the subject officer is interviewed. And then the other part that's prescribed in there, if the investigation is sustained, then there will be a time in which there will be a recommendation put forth, as well as the discipline issued. Only at the point after the discipline is issued and their grievance periods had expired will after that point will the investigation be considered to be closed.
Thanks, Tosh. And if I understand correctly, those timelines are articulated in your like grievance guidelines and policies, but I don't recall that we went into that level of specificity in the MOU. Is that right?
It says post grievance period is what
Okay,
it says
yeah.
in MOU. But the grievance period timelines are governed by AR 247 and also collective bargaining.
Perfect, thank you. One other thing that I wanted to circle back to with your question about complaints, Dave. So we will take in all complaints. And ACPD's policy is also to investigate and review all complaints as well. So any complaints that we receive, we will forward to them and vice versa. There is flexibility in the ordinance and the MOU for you all to determine, a kind of standard around what types of complaints or subsequent investigations you all want to write reports on. So you may decide that there's a certain category of cases that there's not really a compelling community or public interest to do reports on, and you can kind of determine that as you get a little bit more seasoned and kind of get a pulse on what you all think is going to be important for you all to report on. The other thing I wanted to say is in terms of how we receive those complaints, they don't necessarily have to be through our intake system. It's quite possible that, we could get a voicemail or someone could file a complaint with another entity and then that gets forwarded over to us, or they could call on the phone, or they can send an email. But the idea is that anything that's forwarded to us, let's say it's an email to another entity in the county, then we would transpose that over into our civil intake system. That way, all of the data lives there, and then attach the original document to kind of authenticate the form to just ensure that everything that we transferred over into the form is exactly as it was written in the original document. Or let's say it was a voicemail, we could transcribe the voicemail and attach that and use that to transpose the information over, and also probably attach the actual audio of the voicemail as a file to the complaint as well, just to kind of ensure that whatever is being reported is being accurately and kind of to protect the integrity of it. But we want to make sure that all complaints get transferred over into the civil system, so that we're able to track them, and that way the public facing portal, which will make more sense to you when Ian goes through his presentation, will be constantly updated and it'll be accurate because it'll be able to demonstrate how many complaints we're receiving, not just the ones that are inputted into the portal by a member of the community. And that's, again, why it's important for Ian to walk through with you all, make sure that everyone's comfortable with how to input a complaint should you ever need to do that. Unless there's any other questions about what we've kind of thought about for a protocol, I'm happy to kick it over to Ian to walk through civil.
And just one quick question before that. The nature of your briefings for the two people who are assigned the case, do you imagine those being written, verbal, a combination of the two?
Verbal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Allow me to share my screen here. And what I'm going to walk through is just what the members of the public would see when they're filing a complaint, whether they go directly to the complaint or commendation site or whether they're on our webpage here. So if they do go to the webpage, it's right at the top on the right-hand side, submit a complaint or commendation. If they were to click this button, it would take you over to our Oversight by Civil website. So this is Arlington County Police Oversight Portal. It's powered by Civil. The URL is arlingtonva.civiltech.com. If a member of the public is here and we communicate this in the FAQs that are down here, but the suggestion is for them to create an account so that they have the ability to track the status of their case. If they were to do it, let's say through the phone or over email, we could then contact them with the case number so that they would be able to input it down here and actually do the track the status of their case on their own.
So that create account comes up when they did make a complaint?
No, it doesn't. So they have the option to just do it without creating an account. And so sort of one of the benefits of that is just to remain anonymous, if they don't want any sort of account or information attached to them. But we do recommend that people create an account. More than likely, maybe 50-50 or so, but we do include that in the FAQs here, which tips from filing report, all that.
Okay.
And then that's something that we should communicate when we do community outreach, just because it allows them to get email notifications about the status of their complaint. So if we were to update the complaint to in progress, for example, after Mummy and OPR review it, or if it's closed out, they would be able to get email notifications. Otherwise, they would get the tracking number at the end of their complaint, and they could just input it here at the bottom. For whatever reason, this Google Translate thing is popping up, and I think it's because I'm using Microsoft Edge, but normally it doesn't block it off there. But there are 4 options right here on the main web page: the complaint form, the commendation form, and then a recommendation, and then a review form. The complaint and the commendation are pretty self-explanatory. The recommendation and review form, recommendation is just if they have any thoughts for the COB, for the IPA office, or just in general. The first thing we ever got actually was a recommendation filled out, but it wasn't super actually relevant to any of the work that we do, but it is an option for the public to be able to really communicate with us. Civil is developing a tool right now, sort of a chat option, which would allow them to just message our accounts directly if they had a question, rather than having to fill out a form or send an email. And we'll explore kind of the functionality of that once it's released. But the recommendation form is mainly just a way for them to communicate any ideas or questions. And then the review form is sort of similar in concept to the complaint form, but it's if there were a completed OPR investigation or another investigation maybe about some other entity that they wanted us to review, that is the form that they would use there. Otherwise, they would just use the complaint form and maybe indicate that it had previously been investigated by OPR. So I'll jump right into sort of what the complaint form looks like, how it gets filled out. Here's just language about the ordinance, about how these investigations take part and how the next steps. Some contact information here, and then just a disclaimer about the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and how this may be subject to that law. So the individuals, the first question is, do you want to file anonymously? If yes, then they just continue down. If no, then you can see that the email address becomes mandatory, and that's how they will get communications about their complaint being submitted. They do still need to create an account, though, if they wish to have continuous updates about the case. So if I were to put something in here, I'll just put my information right here. I won't submit this complaint. Address, unit, all of that is not mandatory, so they do not have to include their address. They do not have to include the demographic information or their date of birth. But of course, that information may be beneficial for the course of the investigation, and we may request that when we follow up with them. English is the primary language. If yes, then we will continue. If no, then it does have the option for whatever their primary language is. And I will note, on the actual civil site itself, on the complaint portal, it's powered by Google Translate. They can translate it into multiple different languages. So for example, if they want to translate it into Scots Gaelic, they can do that. I'm not sure how many people speak Scots Gaelic in Arlington County, but if they do, they have the option of being able to read the complaint form in that language. So we are ensuring that it can be accessible to people, and the questions themselves will change, but the inputs sometimes may not. So if people need assistance, we've had people call before, and so we're happy to walk through the form with them if they do need assistance. And if there is a language barrier, we're going to make sure that we can have that option for translators or other services that may be necessary.
Did the phone show up on the form?
Right here, so they can call.
Oh yeah.
Right here, or just email independent policing auditor at Arlington VA. And I believe somewhere we also have the Community Oversight Board email, which goes to, I believe, Julie, Garrett, myself, and to Mummy. The reason why I have the phone numbers here is because during business hours, obviously all of you are probably doing your own respective jobs, and so they can call our office and assist them during work. Good with that. Yeah. I was thinking about putting all of your personal cell phones on the website, but decided against it.
The right choice.
Yeah. And then the submitter information, and this is actually something that is used actually for us, since we've been doing some of these complaints on behalf of others. If yes, then they would just signify if they know. If the person knows that they're filing this complaint on their behalf. If no, then they can just continue. Here's the officer information. It's not mandatory because oftentimes it's not known, but they can add as many officers as they as are required. We do have a disclaimer here that we're only able to investigate complaints made against sworn officers, and that if there's complaint or commendation regarding a civilian employee, that they need to report that to ACPD directly. They also have the option of uploading documents. This is particularly useful if we get an email complaint. We can just upload the email directly in there as documentation, but all of this would be associated with the case and would be included in the printed off information. Witnesses, sorry.
If someone only had a car number because they're seeing something that was more traffic related,
Yep.
where in this form would they indicate that?
They could do that in the description, and these are also free text, so if they really don't know, they could just write, Mr. Officer or something here.
Gotcha.
But really, the description would be the best place for that. But that's a very good question. And in the course of maybe no information was known, that's when we would, during the concurrent investigation, work with OPR to figure out the details of the incident. They have the option to do one or more witnesses, so first, last name, email, cell phone number, relationship, and then the incident information. So the date here, they can use the handy calendar here to help them do that. The time, incident location, and the statement of incident. None of these fields are mandatory with the exception of the statement or description for obvious reasons. And then if there had been investigated by ACPD in the past, and if yes or no or unsure, they just select one of those. I will just do something really quick here so I can continue on to the next page. And then they're requested to sign their name and do the recapture to ensure they're not a robot. We do have information, if it's popping up, maybe not. But if they are submitting anonymously, they just get right anonymous. And I think that actually shows in the commendation form, so I'll go and change that right after this meeting. But that's what the complaint form looks like. It's still in Scott's together, so oops. As you can see.
I like it.
I like it too.
I'm fluent. Is everyone not?
I thought it was a requirement for being on the board.
Yeah, me too. Scott's yellow.
Let me go back to.
We have many requirements. That's not one.
So you're saying though that in the beginning, if you chose anonymous, then that signature field would already be filled, would already be filled in with something that would make it clear that you don't have to put your name?
Yes, that's right. So the commendation form, fairly similar language here, contact information, what best describes you, county resident, business owner, et cetera. Some demographic information, and then the same submitter information here. Any involved officers, again, a few options as to why they want to thank the employee, the incident date, time, details, and then a description as well. And then the same deal on the last page, the submission here. So those are really pretty straightforward. The recommendation form and review forms are also fairly similarly structured, but we don't need to go into them right now. The other thing that's really valuable here is the public data. So here's just the compliments over time. I'll look at it. Let's do complaints. So obviously, we'll work on changing this so it doesn't go back quite this far, since obviously no complaints were coming into this system here. And also it makes it look like there's been a ginormous increase, but in reality, there's been 2 so far submitted through the civil system. They can look at just complaints or complaints by month. Let's see if we can start here, January 22, or better yet, January 23. So you can see one was filed in April, one was filed in May, and they can do it by complaints by allegation, discipline, disposition, race, ethnicity, report, or source. We don't have any dispositions yet. Discipline we do not have yet. The allegations I don't believe have been fully pulled out because of the ongoing investigations. So if they were to do it by source, they can see one was done by email. The other one was done over the phone, but hasn't been indicated as such. And so as more data get in, they have the ability to view by a different type, or by a few different types here. And if they wish so, they can download the data. Again, none of this is identifiable. It's all just temporal raw numbers. If they want to download it, they can do it as an image, PDF, or as a CSV file, where it would just show basically just the raw counts by month. And they can just create the graph in Excel if they wish. So no identifiable information for either the complaintee or any involved officers or individuals, just raw numbers over time. And that's to maintain the privacy of everybody involved here and to give the public a way just to kind of get an overview as to what sort of work is being done by.
Some of those filters weren't all mandatory fields though, were they? Like
No,
race?
most of them are not.
Right.
Yeah, most of them are not. So it may or may not appear here. And that is something that is good to note. This, for example, this one complaint.
Self-identified.
Yeah, only one is identified. But those fields would be updated as the investigation would go on, as long as the individual wasn't anonymous. So if somebody doesn't submit, it would show either as blank, or it would just, I think maybe here it just doesn't show at all. So we'll look and see about that. Some of these though, like disposition, discipline, obviously there has been no dispositions yet, so no data are shown here. So that's something to just make note of, that the total numbers would be shown when looking at just complaints overall, and that the numbers by allegation, discipline, race, ethnicity, report, or source might be different based upon what information is available.
Is there somewhere in the FAQ, because I can imagine, as this thing populates and people kind of forget this beginning part,
Yeah.
that someone may look at this and think that's the whole story, and not understand that this is just what came through civil. So is there anywhere in that FAQ, or is there any language that exists or can be added that makes it clear really what numbers they're looking at, and also where they can go to get the other set of numbers?
Yeah, so we actually were working with Civil and they provided us with the FAQ, like their standard set of FAQs that we're uploading onto our FAQ page. If there are more Arlington specific frequently asked questions that come about, we can add those in pretty easily as well. And then for your question about other places to look at the data, we could point to, we haven't released the COB has not released, annual reports yet with, a year's worth of data, but that would be one place where those data would be. In terms of publicly available data though, it most likely would just be the counts that are on Civil, and if they are coming in from any other location, that's where those numbers would be inputted. But that's something that, as we continue on our investigations, we'll probably determine.
Okay.
Yeah, I will make sure that we note those comments. I had similar sort of questions about like what data could disappear if you said anonymous, that like, and I think that all is customizable.
Yeah.
It ends up being a trade-off of like what we want our team to focus on.
Yeah.
In terms of priorities.
Right.
Not that it's zero sum, but just that we do want to I think we want to capture all of that detailed feedback so we can keep continual process improvement.
Right.
Since I think now that we have complaints and investigations we're going to review, I want to make sure that we log. So I'm like making a mental note to myself now to make sure the meeting minutes reflect. I don't know if it's the month before or the month after we publish our annual report.
Yeah.
But I think we collectively want to do a sort of process and protocol review of what did all of this look like in action, and where do we have structural feedback to update. So that's not to discourage anyone from providing it in real time, but to say, let's note and schedule that for a specific discussion so we can do all of those. They tend to be logistical updates, but they can add up. So I think that about how does the data appear in context on the website when someone searches it without submitting, without going through the whole process. And things like if you want it to be anonymous, or if you're comparing this to other data sources, how does that look?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we should have a conversation about that. I can't decide it. I can't figure out my opinion in my head about whether that's, do we want to address that before we release a report, or probably right after, so that in our next sort of year, October timeline, we want to address those things.
Yeah.
But
It will need to, because it'll take that time to get that much information.
It will
the
take that
process
time.
To say, oh, this doesn't,
Right, we don't want to
what we
update,
know.
we don't want to update the FAQs every month.
Right, exactly.
But we do want to update the FAQs so that they are representative of actually frequently asked questions and not just someone said this one time to us when we didn't have anything else going.
Right, exactly.
So thank you for that input. I think it's really important.
And we're talking to Civil just about additional customability with the data and the public facing stuff. There are more items on the back end some more reports that we can run, but again, with only 2 cases, there's not that much data really to visualize.
Right.
But yeah, we want to avoid as much confusion as possible, and I think we'll figure out the best ways to use that as we go forward.
I don't suppose there's a chance of changing the graphics. It just looks so generic.
You know, it's funny because that's actually what the first recommendation was about the pictures here. This is the standard thing. We do have, I believe right now, a 30-day sort of hyper, what is the title, like a hyper assistance period right now with them. So if we had any questions like that, they.
Like a picture from Arlington County.
Yeah, I mean, really, yeah, it doesn't have to be,
Right.
yeah, but just something that.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
custom graphics can be really tricky with county PR, but do you mean that there's a 30-day period where we won't have their same dedicated customer support?
Yes and no. I mean, they also still, their customer base is still relatively small, that it's not, it's not like Microsoft
Right.
where they just will kind of.
They just say we welcome more of it, later it will be a little bit less welcome, but we'll
Yeah.
still, okay.
Later it will be kind of,
I work with a lot of technology vendors, so I'm familiar with the protocol.
yeah. And so I encourage you all to, you know, on your own time, maybe take a look at this and just pretend you're a member of the public, or just oversee, you know, kind of maybe pinpoint some things that you have any suggestions about, and feel free to call or email me, and I'll pass that along to Sybil and get those suggestions worked on. They've been very receptive to some of our stuff already, and they're doing a lot of sort of wider developments into their system here. So we are, they're excited to be able to work with us to make sure that everything is fine too.
You know, the only thing there's nothing there that really suggests you should create an account, other than, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't create an account if I were making a complaint, unless somebody asked me to. Because it doesn't say, maybe that's one thing we could put in the questions, is if you don't create an account, you will only get one update at the end.
Well, or right there where it says track your case, create an account to
Right.
get a status on your case.
Yeah, actually something on the front page. Otherwise,
Okay,
like,
I'll note
you would
that.
never create an account. I don't
Ian, I'm gonna share my notes about this afterwards.
that's
so
great,
that
yeah.
We can capture those specific
Yeah.
things.
And there's been items like that they've been, Philadelphia and Charlottesville are 2 of their customers, and those jurisdictions provided inputs, and so some of the things here are specifically created because of inputs they received from those cities. So they're more than receptive to.
But again, you would be able to give the folks who want to be anonymous their number, so they
Yes.
would have to
So
create the account.
at the end, after you submit, you receive your tracking number, and if they save that, then they'll be able to go right to this page and enter it right there and see the status and any updates to their case.
Okay,
And the case numbers are structured in a way that they do have the date within them, but they have also anonymized, randomized numbers, so it's not sequential. So people wouldn't be able to kind of guess when a complaint would be filed. So it really is unique and respective to the individual who filed the complaint, and
That's good.
Yeah.
So they've given it some thought.
Mhm.
That's, yeah.
All right. So if then no other questions, I'll pass it back over to you, Julie.
okay. I'm gonna share my screen slowly. Just to keep track of this. Okay. So because we had a waiting period at the beginning, I'm gonna just highlight that we are moving but not replacing on the agenda approval of the minutes. It's really important to me, and I think I've heard this echoed throughout the group, that we prioritize community outreach and engagement as a conversation. So for rules of discussion and the protocol specifically, I hope that we've provided enough input to sort of start to anticipate what that process is going to look like. But we scheduled some open discussion in case there was additional conversation. I think we've addressed that, but I just want to pause to say for the closed session rules, which Mummy, Ian, and I have been briefed on by our outside counsel, and then also follow up with Min Chao about it's very
Personnel related, it has to be.
well, it's going to have to be probably an open session. So we're gonna have to develop our own sort of specific protocol for how can we, for both ACPD staff and members of the public involved in a complaint, anonymize that for the conversation. So presumably our protocol at this point will be to create that anonymizing protocol and have the two members brief directly, you know, sort of be the ones accessing or creating a plan for discussion where we can present information that anonymizes those inputs. So we can't just rely on everyone to be looking at specific names on paper or in their notes and not saying those names out loud in the discussion. If we can't, the statute seems to suggest that we can't go into closed session except to discuss COB personnel. It is interesting. That is a very good word.
Like, why was, you know, I mean, like.
Julie, just so I'm clear, if we have a complaint and we want to talk about it, it is always going to be in an open session?
Right now, it does seem like the legislative statute and the local interpretation of the ordinance suggests that that has to be an open session. There isn't a tested legal precedent, so we, in developing our protocols, can have a conversation in our policy subcommittee, which I think should be second to outreach, about how do we want to handle that amongst ourselves for our own sense of comfort in having an open discussion. So what we have right now is the directive from our local legal counsel and our specific outside counsel. We're gonna have our outside counsel brief us on this specifically, and then we'll talk about what protocol is gonna make us all feel like we can have meaningful exchange on information that's gonna feel sensitive and maybe complicated to discuss openly if we're toggling the like live audible redaction of information. It's a sticky point.
It's difficult, like we would assign person A to somebody, wow, and talk about person A and person B. That still seems, if I were person A and I were listening, I would know exactly, I mean, it seems tricky for sure.
Yes, so I mean to point that out as a part of the rules of discussion that we will have a follow-up conversation on with our lawyer, for which we can go into closed session. We can go into closed session to talk with our lawyer about what that looks like and how we're gonna manage it and whether or not we feel comfortable going with the comfortable established interpretation of the ordinance, or if we want to, if we feel comfortable
Create
sort
a
of
test case.
creating a test case that's framed with maybe other protocols that maintain the priority of transparency without putting us all in the position. So that's, I'm saying for this conversation, I'm bookmarking, we would like to discuss that in closed session at a future meeting with our legal counsel so we can ask all the questions and go through some, you know, hypothetical exercises of what will make us feel like, I don't want to speak up at the risk of being the person who says something wrong, and how do we handle that?
Right.
And our counsel did indicate she's available at our next meeting.
Okay.
So she'd be able to come.
Yeah.
Next meeting.
I just don't want there to be this like stigma of someone wanting to submit a complaint and then us having to talk about it openly in detail, because we're going to, the nature of it is going to be through discussion and dialogue, and we can't.
Yeah, that was always.
It's hard to create a conversation of like, I can provide my open inputs and discussion if I'm mentally having to in real time redact anything. But there are arguments to be heard on both sides, so I want to facilitate a specific conversation when we've got our whole group and our lawyer, and we can candidly in closed session express our concerns and interests, and then as a group decide what protocol do we want to go with and what are our options about evolving that over time? So, because there's lots of different paths.
Right, and there would be, I would be interested to know if the subcommittee route has any viability here.
Other things we should talk about.
Okay.
Absolutely. So that's a piece of our open discussion. The two other things I want to acknowledge in open discussion that aren't on the agenda, because we have open discussion on the agenda, is congratulations and welcome to Aaron Miller, who is our Deputy County Manager. He's with us tonight for our meeting. We'll look for opportunities to connect with him in real time as part of our now, outreach and ongoing community outreach initiatives. So congratulations and welcome to Aaron Miller. The other thing I want to acknowledge to Ian and Mummy and the group is we did receive, Gary and I received an email from a non-voting member interested party with some clarifying questions. So just let the group know we have a candidate identified with possibly qualifying experience. We got to look at the specific question asked about. It's not Arlington specific, but what type of law enforcement experience is qualifying or not. So those two things just not on the agenda, but for acknowledgement that they're in process and give everyone full visibility into what we're trying to keep moving. Any other open discussion items?
Yes, I have one. So now that we are in readiness, and I wanted to socialize this, I think openly, and then we can kind of do it, and then I'll send out some notes. But I think now it's important to take before we begin into some investigations, I've always valued the opportunity to have a really strong mission statement and vision, some goals and objectives, really kind of codified and around essentially what would be a strategic plan for what we want to accomplish throughout the next couple of years. And it really does start with first developing and having a conversation around what is the mission of this board and what is our vision of this board for the future. And that would be, I think, a good place to start. And it can be fun. It could be an open conversation of a half an hour with, I don't think it's as sticky, but we would offer some sticky notes where you could add verbs and nouns and adjectives to help develop a good mission statement. And I'd welcome the opportunity to lead that conversation. And yeah, that's the thought, is to add to, if not the next one, then to a future meeting where we get a good chance, maybe about an hour, to develop a good mission statement for our board.
Jim, that is the best open discussion I've ever heard. I really like that idea. I think formalizing a shared sense of purpose and direction is something we've all been really excited about, but that's the best approach I've heard. I wonder if there is good reason to make a community outreach event that's not us going in person and talking to people, but us inviting people to come and speak to us before we then host the people who came to speak could listen in, and then do sort of that kind of whiteboarding sticky note. I love a whiteboard sticky note exercise. It's the only way I plan a project. So I really like that. I am going to say, let's, in the next couple of slides that we have, I think that sounds like the answer to the question I hadn't quite asked, which is, what's our first kickoff event? Partly because I think going and talking to people one-on-one or as identified groups is going to be really valuable, but it doesn't really launch us as a group into the community conversation, whereas inviting people to come and let us just listen, however much time we give them to come and provide their inputs. But I would really benefit from hearing, I know what I think, I would benefit from hearing what you all think. I would really benefit from hearing from some of the members of the community who've come and expressed strong feelings or opinions about what we're gonna do as a preliminary, but I don't know how those two things fit together. So I really like the idea of a kickoff exercise being that the group itself hold a visioning exercise.
Is the suggestion that that is a public as well? 'Cause-
No, that wasn't
Okay,
his
yeah.
suggestion, that was my.
Okay, because I mean, I'm not, to me, I'm not sure that that fits in the public realm. To me, I think that's more of an internal discussion, and it looks to me like the public could say, wait a minute, you guys don't know what you're about, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, we want public input, but I don't foresee us having that discussion with the public as part of it, because to me, yeah, I don't know if that's
No,
what
I
you're
think-
suggesting.
I think inviting the public to speak to us before we hold that kind of an exercise could be valuable. When
I see what you're
we,
saying. I see-
when we
yeah,
said
I
we have an
misunderstood what you were
MOU
saying.
that's gonna happen, some people showed up. And when we had an annual reception, we had some people show up. So if we were to send out an initial outreach email and invite folks to come and do some sort of prepared statement about what they think, that would help us all color what we think in a separate meeting to say, throw our sticky notes on the board and organize that. Sorry, I did.
What they want us to be about, is that what you're, like,
Yeah,
I mean, that makes sense, although we are limited by the ordinance. I mean, ultimately, that's, like, we can't, they say, look, I want you guys to be able to impose discipline on officers and make binding recommendations. We're like, I just think, I don't know, I'm a little
Yeah.
concerned about that.
No,
Because
that's a
then
good
we're
point.
pushing back and saying, I'm sorry, we can't do that, we can't do that, we can't do that.
okay, well, it wasn't, I don't mean to color Jim's input. I think that a visioning exercise amongst the board feels like it would really help us solidify a lot of
That
what
makes
we've
sense to
built
me.
over the last year.
Sort of putting it, distilling it, into a vision statement, something that we could,
Yeah.
hold out there. That makes sense, I think. It's a good idea.
And a couple good goals.
Yeah.
Just, what do we want to accomplish this year?
Right,
What do we want to accomplish next year?
To Dave's point, Mommy and I went to a meeting of the Fairfax County Oversight Board back when they were just after that officer shooting a few months ago. And they had sort of the same situation arise in which they had public comment, and comments were mostly, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And then they had to sort of explain their, role as defined by their ordinance and by any MOU that they may have. And so, having to explain sort of why things maybe aren't, it might be better to be able to be able to start off the conversation with, this is what our roles and responsibilities are and our abilities.
Yeah, it's given to us by the ordinance. I mean,
Yeah.
This is what we are and can do. Yeah, I mean, I'm a little concerned about opening it up to the public and saying, what is your wish list? Because
Yeah.
we're not there. It's like, we have what we have. We have the authorities that we have. And I think
definitely
it's incumbent on us to explain those to the public and to be clear as, what authority we have
And then open it up to their suggestions and input after we
Right.
delineate what the boundaries are. Because it is very valuable to be able to get people's.
well, we have the exact same actually, the structure of this conversation mirrors exactly when Mummy said, I would like to brief two people. I would really like for everyone to be pre-briefed before we all come to the conversation, but the reality is, we need to get started. And next year, we may be in a better position to do these things. So probably having the public come and give us comments and feedback on an annual review of this outreach exercise might be more useful, where there's more documentation and acknowledged structure and boundary of our presence.
We're really just taking our first baby step.
Yeah, right, absolutely. But I love it. I think verbs, nouns, and adjectives is a really good way of framing what we're missing, which is our sort of characterization shared amongst this group of what are our goals, but priorities in achieving those goals, so that we have a target, or sorry, the other way around. We have our priorities. What's our goal for before September? What do we want to get done? How do we want to achieve this?
Yeah, you've highlighted multiple times, and I think it's important. One of our primary goals is community outreach. I mean, we had this conversation at the beginning of the year, and it's been continuous. And that is important. Equally important is that we all have a common talking point about what this board does and what we don't do, and a common mission to why are we here, and to remove some of that ambiguity from the public to avoid our colleagues in Fairfax, so that they can look towards our mission statement and say, this is what our Community Oversight Board does for Arlington County and its community and our community.
I'm gonna put as a note for follow-up for our next meeting, what progress we made on meeting as a group for the sort of social convening, getting together. I know that was something we had discussed about, like, how do we facilitate a credibly transparent opportunity for us to get together to not talk about the COB, but swap some other background leading into that. I don't know that that's before we're able to do the visioning exercise, but I think a visioning exercise absolutely seems like the right priority after tonight's discussion of community engagement, so that we can, amongst ourselves, solidify why are we here and what will our measure of success or failure look like. Because in my work, we start with how will we know we're starting to fail? Because that's a much faster way to figure out that you need to change course, rather than how will we notice if we're not quite succeeding.
Yeah. But again, we can't really have that discussion
privately. I know.
It's so frustrating. To me, that sounds like, right? I mean, that sounds like something we could do if we could do it. That, you know, to me, that's an internal discussion that we would have. And
I think we can have it publicly. I think the challenge that I've had in shaping the agendas every month is that every time we come to craft an agenda, I would like for the first hour of an agenda to be on a topic with open discussion where we have a framing. We have a lot of priorities, and it's like, what I keep reminding myself is meaningful law enforcement oversight, this I'll just go on the record with my personal stance, will look mature in 3 to 5 years from being inaugurated. We are still the inaugural board. We're still doing lots of initialization activities. We're still getting training on new software tools, and we're still like fully ramping up. And it's frustrating to feel like, and I'm sure that there are members of the public who think, didn't this happen last year? But that impatience in my sector has been a real problem for making meaningful progress. So we've started talking a lot about incremental innovation, that it's really in actioning. It's not about what big things you're able to get done. It's about being able to actually go in a deliberate direction that says, this is our mission, are we achieving it? Rather than, is our mission big enough to justify what we are and what we're doing? So I like the idea of a visioning exercise, and I'll solicit in writing separately whether folks feel like they would be able to participate in that in an open discussion that just didn't have such a structured agenda, if we can have that conversation publicly, or if we need to explore what other options there are for either meeting in smaller groups, subcommittees, or something else to accommodate that kind of openness. Because I think having to me, it's not just in writing, it's the key thing I'm hearing from what you're saying is shared.
Yeah.
A like shared, established sense of what and why.
Yeah.
And that takes us to the how, and then that carries the how. The protocols could be very much for their own sake over and over again.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a good idea to do an activity like that, and whatever we come up with, we can like put it on our website or something, you know, so that people get the message of like what we as a body would like to see as us as a COB. But what I really like, what I'm wondering is when we do outreach, there's probably gonna be a lot of people that have like complaints that they wanna give at that moment. you know, about interactions that they've had with the police or whatever. And I noticed that you like put, you submitted like a complaint on behalf of someone, right? So if like anybody like came to those outreach events and they had a complaint like that, would that count as like something that could be submitted to the system?
100%, yeah. Whether they wanted to do it vocally in person, we would write it down, or if they wanted to pull out their phone or laptop and do it there with us, you know, I would sit down with them.
I think that would be a good idea to make it like more accessible, you know, because maybe some people might not know about the portal, but they heard about the event and they show up and got a complaint. And then we can, you know, just get it there and then actually follow it through.
That's a good transition into why outreach will be important. I'm gonna, in my head, bookmark those as separate, Jim, because I think one is still organizing and the other is public engagement. And I didn't mean to like link those two explicitly at the top. So let's.
I just want to say just real quick, I just want to leave out that because you did mention, you know, when you were starting your comment talking about what's on our website, and we do have stuff about us in our about. And it kind of goes to what you were saying as far as that mission is given to us, but the vision that we all have for what it looks like when we're you know, that 5 years out, when we're all that, you're right. That's something that should be, you know, what would this look like when we're doing what we're doing, right? And then also those underguiding goals of, okay, we know what our mission is because, you know, by statute, you know what our mission is. You know, so what are the goals that we derive from making sure that we can fulfill that mission? What are those then priorities, those objectives from there? So that I agree with. But what's interesting is usually in the process, it's that mission also was not given to you already. But I think in ours, we're in a unique position where, you know, as we put it on our about page, we're here to improve transparency, accountability, and community trust in the ACPD. It's right there on our about page, and it was the driving force behind what created us. You know, those things, that's a mission, that's our direction, that's the way that we decide, hey, it's how we decide which way we turn, because we ask ourselves, well, is this improving transparency, accountability, or community trust in the ACPD? So it does serve that core function of what a mission is, but like you pointed out, wisely pointed out, but what does it look like when we're doing that very well? And like you were saying, well, what are those goals that make sure we are doing those three big things? So definitely, I think that it's a good conversation to have, but again, we just have to be very precise about how we're having the conversation.
How goes to outreach, and then later we'll go to our communication protocols, which is another thing. Mummy, I noticed you jumped back on. I wanted to make sure we created a window for you if you had something to add.
No, that was just in response to a comment that I believe I heard Jim make earlier, just kind of about like discussing things in open session and whether or not that would like dissuade someone from filing a complaint, I think was the gist of it. And please correct me if I've misunderstood the question, but I think one thing that I wanted to draw out of that was when you all discuss these topics in open session, and Cynthia will go through this with you all, you would not be identifying the identity of a complainant or an officer. Like you'd have to talk about it in an anonymized way. So it doesn't include like personally identifiable information. So hopefully that would address any concerns that a member of the public might have about, you know, not wanting their personal information discussed in an open meeting.
Thank you.
Sure.
I might stifle the discussion that we might have about it, though. That's the main concern, probably, right?
Let's keep that for our closed council discussion at our next meeting. I think there's going to be an elaborate set of interests and concerns we need to flesh out. But I don't want to curb urgent, pressing discussion. Welcome back. Thank you. You're a pro. She's Mrs. Doubtfiring us in the absolute best way. Thank you. Welcome back. You missed things, but we mostly missed you.
I'll watch the playback to see what I missed.
And you can always.
Yeah, we'll do a recap.
Okay.
Okay. My computer's back online here. Now, finally, Oh, your timing's impeccable. I will entertain a
I
vote.
have to,
I was shocked.
It
Closing the
is
door.
still time for us all to have a sense of humor, and I rely on that. Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting. One or two?
well,
Two
I-
previous meeting minutes.
Our most recent one, in that most recent minutes, the vote said 501, I thought it was 601. It was 50? I thought it was 601. Can it be 601?
I just rewatched this.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the vote to approve, yes.
Would
that
it be
needs to
601?
modified.
Right.
Now I'm notified that, I think.
Yeah, because it says 501 right now. I knew that was one, that's the one thing I remember.
Well, it was 6 votes yay, no votes nay, and one
Yeah,
abstention
one present, yeah.
for the approval of the MOU.
Gotcha.
But since there were 7 of us, no, it is
Oh,
501.
someone wasn't there?
Nope, you're right, sorry, my math is bad.
601.
I was just thinking of the empty seat, but you're right, it's 7.
Yeah.
Everybody was here. and-
Yes, everyone was here, so yeah, so 601.
Perfect. Okay, did you update that?
I will update that right after.
Okay, then we will suspend approval of the meeting minutes until,
Oh, no, with that, I'll make a motion to approve the 2 minutes with the amendment made that the vote be recorded as 601.
excellent. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Wonderful. 5-0.
Yes. 3, 4.
For our notes. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate that. Now I'm gonna jump forward in time here because we did things just. Okay, community engagement. We did have some initial organizing efforts around this that I wanted to review for Charles' benefit since some of this predated everyone in the group, or some people in the group. We started talking about our communication and outreach efforts a long time ago, thinking about what do we need to engage. We had an initial draft that we presented at our, I think, October meeting. And then coming out of training, we identified the need for a subcommittee so that we can address this a little bit more fully. So part of what we want to talk about tonight is if anyone is interested in leading and or supporting the subcommittee so that we know how to coordinate going forward. So for our target outreach initial activities, I have a draft outreach email that I formulated as a very preliminary measure in inviting people to participate, recognizing the benefits of active participation, and asking them both to say that we have the right contact information for you and whether or not you're interested in further engagement, but also as a second item, oh, I'm not sharing my whole screen, sorry. I meant to share the window. There we go. Initial outreach email. I will circulate this amongst the group, get everyone's opportunity to provide input and feedback. Mainly we'll be looking for substantive, is there something else we need to acknowledge or something we want to be more careful about? In general,
And that's an outreach email to the.
To who?
Yeah.
Exactly. Excellent question. So in our initial community outreach plan, and this is what I'll send you with the outreach email after the meeting this evening.
Julie, your screen's still on.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sharing a different document. It really doesn't like when I switch applications. So this was part of our draft plan last year, and these were individuals. These are publicly identified on the Arlington County website, so I'm not just broadcasting everyone's contact information separately, but there are a bunch of different groups that are officially or formally affiliated with Arlington County.
Mm-hmm.
These are groups that we have no ability to see when they got connected, what the purpose of their involvement is, or how they got on this list. But it's a good way for us to create sort of a more comprehensive than what the 8 of us can just think up off the top of our head. So I'm gonna send this out in an Excel spreadsheet that you guys can edit and just add people. I think unless anyone disagrees, it would be best to send this to anyone we can think of that we think would be interested. And then our call to action is pretty simple. Oops, there we go, show this window. A call to action of like, tell us whether or not this email works. And then this request is, would you like any additional information specifically? Would you like us to come to you? Would you like to know more, one-on-one? And then also, do you know of anyone else who, I'm not doing this anymore, but you should actually be talking to so-and-so. So I think that keeps it simple and helps us just kick off these events. I think it will be difficult for us to know exactly what to do until we're getting that specific input and feedback.
Can I ask you a question? I mean, and I haven't seen the language of the email, but does it propose that we meet with these groups, or they can ask to meet with us all together, or just one representative, or like the whole group, or what was the thinking on that?
My thinking in the initial draft was that we just asked them to confirm receipt of the email as like a bare thing, as the minimum, because we would like to get confirmation of whether or not this reached anyone.
Yeah.
But then there's additional things, and it's sort of like the anonymous. At a bare minimum, we would just like to know if we've reached you. Second to that, we're interested in knowing if you have any specific interests, concerns, if there's a format, if you guys have existing meetings where you would like us to come and speak to you, if you would like to meet one-on-one. I mean, so
there's options. I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
And provide, I don't know why it keeps blacking out. I hope that's not doing it on Teams. Let me do this, I'll pull this back up because yeah. So because we want to encourage that if somebody looks at this email 6 months after they get it, they still feel, oh, I can do that.
Honestly.
I always feel that way. We want to, I think, keep this simple that anyone at any time who at some point has this email feels encouraged to participate. So hearing directly from us if they have any specific questions and if they have any additional specific information about how to contact them. So I'll put this online so you guys can all suggest edits and track changes. I think that separate from the subcommittee, I would really like us to send this email having everyone's input reflected. That's why I'm taking the time in a meeting to go over this, and I'll make sure that Lisa and Gary get a chance to provide their inputs as well. But that is sort of, I think, our best first outreach because it signifies our general interest in not just outreach, but in hearing feedback from people about how and to whom we should be doing outreach. So I didn't mean to stop sharing my screen. I meant to stop sharing that window. I think I'd be better at this. There we go. Okay. So the draft outreach email and then the stakeholder catalog is what I'm going to circulate to you all after this meeting tonight, and you guys can provide editorial feedback. I would ask that you track changes just so I can follow up if you all have competing inputs, but the stakeholder catalog, I would say be liberal in it. We want to send this email to lots of people. If somebody doesn't want it and isn't interested, it's easy for them to discard. So that's my thoughts. My second priority is does anyone want to identify themselves as specifically interested in leading this subcommittee and or participating?
I mean, I'm interested to do that, either.
Participate in an initial meeting.
Right, yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. I mean, I'm extremely busy in the next month, and I'm not just, I'm literally like working 2 jobs, selling my house, and doing 6 presentations across the country in like the next 6 weeks. So I mean, I honestly am sort of freaked out just as I'm sitting here. But so putting that out there once mid-June is over, I'm much freer to do stuff.
Okay. I think for the subcommittees for the first year, it's gonna be like everything else. We're gonna be a little bit agile and then eventually we'll get the hang of it. And somebody will have, and saying, I would like to chair this committee, I'm gonna do these 5 things on this schedule and I know what's expected of me. So
Yeah,
I think that's.
okay.
religion.
I mean, I'm sure, I think we can meet sometime in the next month and then figure out next steps. I don't want to let things go too long because like the summer is like, we got to get out there.
So that's my next question is, I would love to schedule a subcommittee meeting virtually for next week. That everyone can attend virtually. We don't need to be here in person and it doesn't need to be 2 hours and it doesn't need to be in the evening. We could do it at lunch, we could do it in the morning, we could do it in the afternoon. So if folks want to say who's interested in participating in that meeting, I'll show you. I think the goal will be to refresh the outreach plan that we kind of started last year where we were talking about, you know, in order to reach a really representative cross-section, we can't just have scheduled appearances and go say talking points. We need to make ourselves available in lots of different
I think that's right.
formats and forums. And so I think there are several different channels that are going to require more work and involvement from us that we would be willing to do because they'll be more informal and won't necessarily require us to all be here in person. So with that sort of comment as the background, who feels like they do not want to be excluded from scheduling next week a virtual subcommittee meeting on outreach? Does anyone?
So like a double, I do not want to be excluded. So I want to be I want to participate. That's not what you're asking.
Yeah, like knowing that it's going to be next week.
Yeah.
And
But like in the evening sometime virtual.
It could be in the evening, it could be at noon.
If you could just send something out, you know, and then just, and have us, you know, check off, you know, yes or no, or are you gonna start off by doing a, I forgot the app, you know. where
I'm
you
not
can
gonna
get
do a
everybody
doodle,
together.
and the only reason I don't do doodles is somebody doesn't fill it out, and then the experience of it sort of gets undermined. So I was hoping we
Well, I
could.
mean, not filling it out, it's filling it out. I mean, they've kind of made their intent, you know.
Okay, I'll send a doodle for next week. Who really
The
wants
only
to
thing I can't
attend
do
that
is
meeting?
Monday. I mean, so
Okay.
I can do it, and maybe Friday. Tuesday, Wednesday.
I mean, especially since we don't have people here, I think the doodle may be the best way for a consensus date to be there. And then after that, you can send that to the folks and say, well, this was the consensus date. If you can be here, great. If not, well, we already know the 3 people, 4 people, 5 people who said we can.
Would you like to be in the community outreach meeting?
You can send me the doodle and I'll see if it can work my schedule. I think it may be able to.
Okay, so to my original question, does anyone really not want to be excluded from that meeting? Like they will feel like,
Does anyone not want to be included?
Depending on, like, what time is it?
We don't know yet.
We don't know.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So yeah, once you send it, then we'll be able to know.
So, yeah. So
everyone here really wants to participate in the specific programming of our outreach plan.
I think we all thematically
If I
want
were
to
the
be
chair, I would
knowledgeable
probably
about that.
delegate this to a subgroup.
I'm gonna tap out.
Yeah.
Jim does not feel strongly about
Nope.
being included.
Nope.
I appreciate
Yep.
that.
You know what, go ahead and put my name down only because of the time.
Yeah.
But I'll figure it out once you send the doodle.
Everyone will be able to review all of the draft inputs, but for compiling the draft inputs, we need a smaller group and we gotta do it next week. Otherwise, it will be July and we'll be dealing with our reports and investigations and compilations, so.
I'll be there for the barbecue, but not for the discussion.
Okay, stellar. Okay. Candidate stakeholders, I'm gonna ask you all to participate in that. Initial outreach channels, I'm gonna go over this quickly. For what we initially envisioned as options, these are not final. The final will be in an outreach plan that we all sort of agree to, but the organized, structured meetings that we have here, if somebody were to come on this meeting and say, I have a huge problem, I hate the internet, I don't have a computer, this is my complaint, I want somebody to follow up with me, we could have a scheduled, structured follow-up interview. That would be one form of participation. We have the comment or complaint submittal on the website. The unstructured forum is where I think we need a little bit more creativity. So I think that if we had, for example, monthly office hours where 2 of us and the IPA are available on a rotating basis for some period of time in the evenings, it would give us a chance to chat in that, or socialize in that not public meeting restriction forum. And people can come to us where it's a scheduled time, they know where and when they can find us, they don't have to be necessarily on Teams. I think there are logistics to be worked out about how we would collect that information and then how we would share it with the group. If they came to us in confidence and wanted to talk one-on-one, how would we brief the rest of the group? But that's an initial idea about how can we sort of hold some predictable, right, interval that's not on Teams in public. And similarly with unstructured, currently their access to us is by email or in response to our outreach. But I think we want to flesh out this list of possible outreach channels to be a little bit more creative. And I'm sure we'll get feedback from the initial outreach email to the initial stakeholder group, but this is just sort of our current thinking. So I wanted to give folks a chance to comment or provide feedback on anything we might be missing as we go into the outreach subcommittee meeting organizing. Otherwise, we'll start with this.
I think it's worth trying. The thing that's unique up there is the sort of office hours, which is kind of a cool idea. It could become a scheduling issue, right? For somebody, I mean, would you just have to be could you just have it be on a phone? Like they could call me at these times, or would you have to be available to a computer?
So my thought was that we have this meeting and the public certainly can sign up to participate in these meetings, but these are public and broadcast and they can come in person. My thought was that if we made ourselves available virtually and in person on, again, sort of a rotational basis, if we picked a recurring time that the third Thursday of the month from 5 to 6:30.
Okay, yeah, something like
right,
that.
2 people are available, it would mean that probably twice a year, we all need to stop that and make ourselves accessible. And the time may
That
need to
is
change.
definitely doable, although I'm not sure that there's that. I mean, I was thinking it was going to be more often, like, once a week or something. But I mean, because if it's once a month, I mean, do you think the public's gonna, and it's a 2-hour window? I mean, they're gonna have to schedule it to do it at that point.
Well, but they also have the option of, myself or mommy are usually in office too, so during regular working hours, albeit the Court Square West building where we are is not publicly accessible, you need to be swiped in order to access, but if someone were to, have a desire to come in person during the workday, or maybe at some other point, myself or mommy might be able to kind of facilitate that and work with you all to ensure that someone is there.
The generalized case that motivated this idea in my head is for people generally who have a sort of ongoing frustration or complaint, and they're not the kind of person who wants to fill out an internet form, and they just want to talk to a person, and they're not sure about going to a county building, that having some virtual portal where they can access
I think it's creative.
to people would make it possible for folks to, I don't know, we've had different inputs from different people at different times with different communication styles and abilities, and I just framed this out because it made sense to me that, like, what are we missing from our current outreach, accessibility? You can come to our public meeting or you can file a complaint online. Please send us an email for anything else. Those are very structured and they tend to require access to technology, and foresight and planning isn't as programmed, but for folks who have legitimate interest in maybe providing feedback on our visioning statements or our report or something, that they have a scheduled time where they say, I'm gonna put it on my calendar and I'm gonna go. I don't know.
No, I think it's a creative idea. So as you were talking, some other ideas popped into my head about something we talked about a minute ago. What might, unless there's, so what I was thinking was, when the list that you showed of folks who are going to send the introductory letter to, and we really, I can't imagine that the entire group is going to be able to, if they say, look, we want to meet with somebody. Maybe what we could do is provide slides or talking points that any one or two of us, you know, if a group says, I want to hear from somebody from the board about just what you guys do. And maybe if we send it to 50 groups, a dozen groups, we can't all do that, you know,
Right.
but we have talking points that we go and each one of us, or, you know, I can do that one, you can do that one. That would be helpful, I think, because that's a basic message. Kind of goes to your point of like distilling some basic, you know, it's different than the vision statement, but some basic points like, okay, this is what we do. Nobody's going to read the ordinance. We got to have something that's.
Well, or for people who read the ordinance and say, this doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah.
I mean, I had to read it
Yeah.
7 times before I was like fully aware of everything that's in it, and still
Yeah.
sometimes I have, like, I don't know the
Pretty long
sections.
document,
I think that is helpful for the comms plan, which we talked about being separate. I think, for
Yes.
example, once we get into investigations, making sure everyone feels equipped with some small language that says, I'm not deflecting or obfuscating or hiding anything, but I'm not really authorized to give you any more information than to acknowledge your question, right? I think there are pieces of that for going to outreach meetings and saying, you know, these folks want to hear from us. We will get to every group that reaches out to us. Whether we get to them all in the first month that we receive their, you know, request depends on our feedback. But I think part of the outreach committee will be identifying folks who feel confident and flexible enough in their scheduling to be able to go to an 8:30 book club that, you know, just read a book on something and they want to hear from the COB meeting.
Right, or a church or something, or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, group, whatever.
Any sort of niche organization that's not already affiliated with the county who wants to hear from us, deserves to hear from us, but how and when we approach that should be a strategized document, because we will have other demands on our time, which has already been sometimes cumbersome. I'm gonna go back to open discussion if anyone has additional comments.
I did have one thing. I know it's happened to two, Martina and Nico, we both worked on it, but the multi-factor authentication from whether it be your laptop or from your
Mine
phone.
just expired.
Yes, so if you encounter a sort of the dead loop where you keep getting the authenticator problem.
Yeah, I did that last month.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't actually help you. The same problem happened to myself, the same problem that happened to Mummy. It's if your device resets or you get a new device, you have to call DTS and reset your multi-factor authentication.
I have some concerns because I never had to, did anyone else have to create a password to use evidence.com or?
That, it should be.
I mean, it was weird. I just was clicking.
It was really weird. It just kind of started and then like,
Yeah, okay, I'm in, but I never created a password.
Yeah, so that's because it goes through your county account.
Yeah.
So it's associated with the Active Directory.
When does the two-factor come into play? I've never had to.
When you log into your county email.
Okay, because I just keep it as a favorite on my, you know, internet, and I just always go there, and I've never.
And it's like there now. Yeah.
So if it logs in for you, then you're good, but if it ever comes to the point where you try and log in, it says that you need to open the authenticator app on your phone, and you do that, and then you can't log into the authenticator app on your phone. Or if it keeps giving you numbers, you just call DTS.
Totally forgotten about these.
Well, sometimes you can close your browser and like refresh things, but
Yeah.
I
If it gets to a problem where you have no idea what's going on,
That will happen to me.
yeah,
Sure.
call DTS and likely it's that they've reset your multi-factor
and it will come up on the page and it'll say, call DTS at this number.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wish I could fix it because it would just make everyone's lives so much easier, but it's beyond my control, unfortunately. The same thing has happened to me too. And in my previous job, the same thing happened, but unlike here, they never fixed it, so I just couldn't use my phone. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we have covered all the agenda items. We're really grateful for our remote virtual participants tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Any additional comments from the board?
When is the next meeting?
June 12th.
June 12th.
14th, June 14th.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's the week I'm out of town, but,
You can,
I mean, I can, yeah, I mean, I think I can do it virtually. Is it possible or no?
if I'm gonna send a doodle for next week, I was hoping we'd have at least one more person here tonight to go over the proposed schedule, because I can send out a doodle, but folks' schedules sometimes change this time of year. we have still 2 all virtual meetings left to hold. There was some conversation about using one over the summer on purpose or saving it for a need. I think it makes more sense to use it on purpose, maybe for, I don't have a preference if it's June, July, August, or September. I know that we have different family and vacation schedules, but does anyone know that they have a conflict? I'll put up the schedule, hold on. While I have you, we have, let's just say 9 more minutes and we'll still be out a half hour early. Okay, these are our planned remaining dates. Ignore the subcommittees. And help me out, please. So we have June 14th, July 12th, August 9th, September 13th, and October 11th. That gives us our 11 meetings for the year.
But officially, you don't have to meet
Officially,
after
we don't
October
have to
11th.
have, the additional meetings we have can probably be virtual if we want to have. I mean, I think after we submit our annual report, we're going to want to have another meeting, just so it's not September to the new year, but no, that covers our meeting requirement.
Can you send that around? Like
Yes.
the document? Yeah.
Well, I'll send the dates, this document's kind of
Okay.
useless, just in terms of formatting, but our next meeting is June 14th. I think we did circulate these earlier this year, and there was some conversation about whether folks are mostly traveling July, August, or September for an all virtual meeting. I was assuming that July or August would be likely to benefit from all virtual meetings, because even if folks are in town, it's a busier recreational time of year.
General rule of thumb, though, it would be the second Wednesday of every month, are the scheduled meetings, barring any.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
That has been the standing
Right,
schedule.
right.
These are all the second.
Oh,
Wednesday
okay,
of every
okay,
month.
okay, sure. So if the one in June, can that be like this one partially virtual? Or have we used up the partially virtual?
No, I mean, like Lisa and or Gary could attend tonight virtually, that's fine. It's an all virtual meeting that we have restrictions on
Right,
beyond individual attendance.
So even if it goes into closed session, it's fine, it's fine if individuals are virtual? Okay.
I think we still need a physical forum for that. but-
Yes.
You share with us.
Yeah.
Would be a good idea, maybe, for us to like leave comments about when would be a good, month to make one of the meetings virtual, or to like say, maybe I'm not gonna be here at this specific date or something like that.
Okay,
Maybe like make it a
Yes, we
shared
should- I think
document.
we should try to-
People can Go in and just put, okay, for this day, I know I'm not gonna be, so they've already pre-planned that they already know I'm not gonna be here, say for July 12th. So you see how you got that open spot right there, that open box or column? That's, if you had it in a shared document, people could put in there, so then you can pre-plan, if there's a physical quorum and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
I mostly was wondering if folks had travel plans for, or vacation plans for any of these meetings. We have been meeting the second Wednesday of every month for a long time. But
If
we'll
we
send out Teams meetings, invites for these, and a meeting schedule, so y'all can add if you have a conflict or need to attend virtually ahead of time.
Yeah, it's a good idea just to think ahead and send it. I mean, I don't have any conflicts other than June, but.
So I'll send those out in Outlook, and then you could just respond to the Outlook notification, whether you're planning on being in person or virtual, or if you have a conflict at that time.
That was our plan after the last meeting. The question that came up the last time we had this conversation was from someone who's not here about, could we please pick which meetings we wanted to be all virtual? And we wanted to have all of our calendars and pick which of those 2 dates we would prefer to do so. So we'll just do that at a different meeting. It sounds like it won't be June. So if we're all here for June 14th, we can revisit that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, because I can't be here, but.
Virtually, yeah, but we don't all need, we don't have multiple conflicts.
But don't you need a physical quorum if you're gonna vote on something? So you need at least 5 people? Okay.
So we'll need to ensure we have 5 people. They go into closed session.
We'll confirm that when we send it out.
What's the status of another?
Oh, yeah, because June, we're gonna go into closed session. 'cause we're
That was
talking
one of the
terms,
things we
right.
talked about while you were gone. We had one email request for clarifying information about what qualifying experience is. So we have a backlog of candidates interested in being voting members, but a non-voting member doesn't really change the quorum. Like, we have a full 7 voting members, and we need 5 voting members for a quorum. So 2 members can be physically absent at any time and still have a quorum. The challenge is if we are missing 3 folks, or if we have 2 who are missing and somebody needs to be virtual. If someone's virtual, like next week, if you're virtual and we have full attendance, we can still vote on something and you can still participate because there's a physical quorum here.
Right.
If, let's say, you're attending virtually and there isn't a physical quorum, then you can't participate in a vote and we don't have a quorum. But I don't think we have anything scheduled for a vote next meeting at this time.
Okay.
It's a lot of protocols. Okay, I will declare this adjourned because we covered all of our agenda items and look forward to seeing you all again in June.
Excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
They still going downstairs? Of the joint meeting still happening?
Yeah, I think they do.
Crushing it, buddy.
Yeah. We'll go back down.
Yesterday.
Take care.
Yes,
don't have a good one now.
Thank y'all.
I just learned how to spell the word adjourn.
You know what?
Apparently I forgot how to.
I got my.
Spelling is
I
not.
looked at my bag. I
required
didn't bring it.
in the
I didn't bring it.
business
I didn't bring it.
anymore.
No,
There's-
you gotta go down with.
Jim, I love your idea. I want to do that on a whiteboard at my
I know,
last whiteboard.
with a bottle of wine.
With, yeah, that's definitely without.
How do we